southern capital is going to be the thing to do. So, leaving Washington, going mostly over water, and assaulting Richmond is McClellan's plan. But obviously, we talked a lot about this. He's way overcautious, to the extent that he doesn't even really get to fighting Richmond. He's sort of stopping whenever possible, moving it as slowly as possible. So Lee does a great counterattack, which totally breaks this whole assault off, and McClellan has to retreat. But in the meantime, the Confederates also at Yorktown, which is sort of on the way to Richmond, totally outsmart McClellan, delaying him further just by, I guess you could say, doing sort of a little bit of theater. Some set pieces in Yorktown, some fake cannons made out of logs and that sort of thing, which is a hilarious trick, very effective, and kind of shows this, the nature of information and misinformation in this war and how important that's going to be all around. Now, really, if McClellan had managed to win here, the war might have been over already. But it's really his lack of aggressiveness which makes this, turns this really into a loss instead of a potential war-ending win. As also happens later, with kind of the draw, I guess you could say, at Antietam, even though it's a very decisive battle in the grand scheme of things, McClellan could have won there as well. I mean, could have just flat out ended the war, had he perhaps been more aggressive. But on the other hand, we don't want to make it sound like he's incompetent, just rather that he's so cautious in comparison with other generals that he's missing some prime opportunities. Yeah, the 7 days refers to Lee's counterattack from Richmond. All right. Overall Union strategy, and this is what we refer to as total war. Trying to take Richmond, as McClellan was doing, trying to blockade the sea coast, obviously, trying to cut the South in half by going up and down the Mississippi, trying to also then use that for economic and sort of troop movement advantage, and trying to cut the remaining Confederate states into smaller chunks, and trying to engage the enemy wherever they were, trying to grind them down through attrition, just through being able to kill off more than were killed, as well as to defeat the South's economy, or to undermine that. Eventually, the Emancipation Proclamation is a key part of that war strategy in this regard. Major issue here that Britain was involved with was that they didn't want a future war with the North if the North were to win. Just as the Union didn't want, I mean, they're not excited about the possibility either, which is one of sort of their disadvantages. The sea blockade sort of works. It's leaky. I mean, there's blockade runners, ships going through the blockade to bring in supplies, making a ton of cash, money, as the phrase goes, as they do so. Really the major threat to the blockade, once Britain is sort of out of the picture, is when the Southerners outfit one of an old warship with originally called the Merrimack, but then the Virginia, into an ironclad warship, and it starts to beat up on the Union ships that it fights. Union gets its act together, builds one of its own ironclads, and they have a hilariously indecisive battle because they can't really hurt each other. But there was a real threat here to break through the blockade. That's really what the Merrimack potentially could do. Is really the first time the South had a technology, sort of an industrial advantage, I guess you could say. But the North met that right away. Otherwise, things may have been very different if that blockade was successfully lifted. Going through the slides. Computer slowing down. There we go. Antietam. Nice. All right. Battle of Antietam. Now, as we said, this was one of the occasions on which McClellan could potentially have ended the war way, way earlier. But what Lee is trying to do here is to say, okay, maybe we can get the border states in on the Confederacy side. Maybe we can get that in international support. Maybe we can draw up terms of peace with the Union. All three of these things are going on in Lee's mind. If we can win a massive victory on Northern soil. Unfortunately, the plans get found by Union soldiers, and McClellan's able to get ready to meet Lee's forces in a particularly effective manner. And ultimately, the battle's a stalemate, but it represents a major turning point because from here on out, the likelihood of European support kind of goes away, and it's one of the first sort of I don't want to call it a Union victory, but something that went their way strategically and politically. But it was the most deadly battle up to that point. Although Gettysburg was overall deadlier. At Antietam, there was more casualties than in all of the other wars America had fought in since the Revolution. Another major effect here is that it gives, instead of giving Lee and Jefferson Davis and the others the sort of political leverage they need to do what they want to do, it gives Lincoln in the North the political leverage to make the Emancipation Proclamation, which is a war act. It's not a law. In other words, it doesn't affect the Union. It only affects the Confederacy. It's like an act of war against the Confederacy to free the slaves. And this also serves as sort of a prelude to the Battle of Gettysburg, which the Union does win, and is part of this similar effort, though, by Lee to try to win a major victory in the North. Emancipation Proclamation itself, we say that it's long on proclamation and short on emancipation because in order to keep the border states in, Lincoln doesn't free the slaves in the Union. The border states still have slavery for the time being. Really, I think until the end of the war, until the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments come into play. As to why Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves, I mean, I think it's hard to argue that he did it just because he thought it was the right thing to do. He may have thought it was the right thing to do, but he, I think, sincerely was more concerned with keeping the Union together. 54th Massachusetts Regiment, we watched a few of the clips from Glory. A few major things here to touch on. Really, the episode, there's two important sort of episodes, I guess you could say. One is, when the whole regiment, including the officers, decided to go without pay. That was a critical demand, I guess you could say, for equality.